So welcome and thanks all for coming. So thanks especially to those, some of whom are here, who have given feedback on this, who've given some support on this already. And let us flesh out the details of what we're going to do in this pilot program. So what we're going to talk about today is student mentoring. So what we're saying here, making a meaningful impact and guiding aspiring professionals. I didn't write that line, but I kind of like it. So what this really is going to be about is mentoring of students by those who aren't students. So that's what we mean by student mentoring here. So I'll do some intros in a moment, and then we'll get into the detail of the issue. There we are. So this being Zoom, there's no Q&A function on this. We do have a chat function. So please do put questions in the chat if you have any. I may well stop along the way, but certainly we can get to those questions in a Q&A session at the end if you have any. So if you've got any questions or comments in general, please do stick them in there. And if there will be a couple of points where I ask particular questions about particular things, you please do put them in the chat there as well. So I'm Dave Donahue, I'm the chair of the Bristol and Bath branch, and I'm a software engineer in my day job at Hewlett Packard Enterprise in Bristol. And I've been working there for about 15 years. I've worked in software in general for about 30 years now, pushing 30 years. And for the past maybe 6-7 years, something along those lines, I've worked really quite closely with students and early career people, which means that I've worked in STEM outreach at Key Stage 4 and 5, through to work experience and interns and apprentices up to level 6. So that kind of early career thing has been a fairly decent part of my working life in the past 6 or 7 years. And that's been a big part of my motivation for doing this kind of thing, for getting this kind of program up and running. So it's just that early career stuff is a big part of what I would like to do. So what I want the takeaway points to be today are an understanding of what this program is going to be. So this is going to be a pilot program, by the way. So in addition to it not having started yet, it's going to be a pilot in academic year 24-25. But I want people today to walk away with an understanding of what we want that pilot program to be, what we want this pilot program to be. Also, though, I want you to understand who the stakeholders are, so who's going to be involved in it. And I very much want the stakeholders, so the people involved, to be you as part of those people. So certainly as some mentors, we are absolutely keen on getting mentors today to think about being a mentor for students in the upcoming program. And see how you might fit into it. May well be as a mentor, but it might be in some other role. There's a few other roles involved in this program that aren't simply about mentoring. So we'll talk about what they are as well. But these are the takeaways. This is what I want people to understand today, is what this program is going to be, who the stakeholders are, how those stakeholders are going to play together, and how you might be one of those stakeholders, how you might be playing a part in delivering mentoring to students. So we'll talk now about my motivation, our motivation, in a bit more detail for the program, and then what the program actually looks like. Pardon me. So the initial motivation for this recently was basically a random coffee shop chat. So Max is actually here today, in fact. Max was a student who's just finished his first year at Bath Uni, and we just happened to be in the same coffee shop working, so laptops out, doing a bit of stuff, which is evidently software. If you can, see a black screen and some words, then you can tell when someone's messing with some software. And we had that random chat in a coffee shop in town in Bath, which is where I live and where Bath Uni is. And that turned into something really quite useful. We talked about software, we talked about internships, we talked about education, we talked about university, we talked about a lot of things in this area. Something I will talk about later on today is actually we talked about running and cycling as well. I think that's going to be a key aspect of how we might decide which mental relationships are going to work well and which ones are going to work less well. So that non-technical stuff is going to be a big player in these conversations as well. So we talked about all these things. But then one of the things that struck us, I think, was that this kind of valuable conversation, this kind of valuable mental relationship, shouldn't be left to chance. We shouldn't just do this when it happens to happen because we happen to meet somebody in a coffee shop that works in an industry where I'm studying. That's not the way this should work. If I'm going to do this kind of thing, I should do this more effectively, better planned. We should do this properly rather than leaving it to chance. Because in fact, I had an interesting conversation with Matthew Bellringer the other day from neurodiversity, and I'll talk about neurodiversity in a moment as well. That actually, it's not random. These kind of random chats in coffee shops are not random, because the people who might meet someone who works in their industry in a coffee shop are not randomly selected, they're self-selected. So that disadvantage aspect of this is going to be something we can try to address by doing this better. So if we rely on random chance, we're actually relying on people who go to coffee shops, which may well not include people who might otherwise be disadvantaged in their education. So we're going to think about that a little bit as the program goes on as well. So, so what we're going to do in this program is piggyback effectively onto the existing BCS mentoring scheme. So there is such a scheme already. And what we have here is the ability to use BCS to register as a mentor, or use BCS to register as a mentee, and then to find matches from people who might be valuable. I can find someone that I might mentor, or I can find a mentor. This already exists. This is already a thing. But it doesn't currently, well, I'm not spelled currently, apologies. It doesn't currently target students. This is not something that we're currently using to allow people in industry to work with people who are students. So we don't have that. So in fact, having looked around the industry a little bit more, we don't have that anywhere. It's not just that we don't have it here, we don't have it, it's not a thing. So what we're doing at the moment is working with BCS. So Adam Scott, our vice chair, is working with BCS centrally to see how we might be able to tweak that whole registration scheme to make it a little bit easier for students and people who want to mentor students. But basically what we're thinking about is doing this. We have mentor relationships, not managed, mediated, I guess is the right word, by BCS. It feels really quite like a dating app, if I'm honest. So you write a profile about yourself, you say some stuff about yourself, and that will let you find a mentor or a mentee. And we'll tweak that a little bit to make it work more effectively for students. That's what we're going to do. So the target here is students that don't have that industrial contact. So there's really two, perhaps three different kinds of students who don't have that industrial contact. There's students whose degrees are going to involve an internship, where they'll get that contact at some point in the future, but they're not at that point yet. So there might be first years or early second years where they're going to have an internship, but they haven't done it yet. There might be students on degrees that are still in our industry. They might be BCS accredited degrees, they might be software engineering degrees, but there's no internship in there because for whatever reason they've chosen not to do it, even though it might be available. So they're not going to get that industrial contact as part of their education. Or perhaps later on, and we're not planning this right now, it might well be students who are studying degrees that don't have that vocational aspect. My degree is in maths. I studied algebra. I didn't study software. So from that point of view, we might consider later on adding that industrial contact to students who wouldn't otherwise get it at all in their degree. But certainly what we're doing here is thinking about adding that industrial contact earlier. So if our first cohort, in fact, will be Max's cohort. It will be people who will be second years at Bath Uni in 3 or 4 months, so they'll be second years then, and they will quite likely be looking for internships that will begin in a year and a bit from now, a year or so from now. So that will be the first cohort that we're going to look at, but they'll get that contact from an industrial mentor much, much earlier than they otherwise would have through the internship. That's really what we're talking about here. But this is going to be a pilot as well as just the program itself. So the pilot nature of this is going to mean that's going to be smaller in a number of ways. We're not going out to all universities. We're not even going out to all universities in our region. And we're not going out to all students in those universities. And we're not going out to all degree courses in those universities. We're all going to keep it fairly deliberately small. So we've had contact already with the University of Bath, with Bath Spa University, and with the University of the West of England. And in fact, speaking of random chats, which I have been a little bit, this is basically random. So I live in Bath, so I met Max at a coffee shop. That's how the University of Bath got involved. I work part-time at the University of the West of England. And in fact, I work really quite near there in my day job. So I work in Bristol, and that's really how these things get involved, how the universities got involved. So this speaks a little bit to the random nature of how some of these beneficial things happen to students. You get lucky, basically, and you happen to live in a city that's got this kind of industry going on, and you get lucky and you happen to meet someone who can help out. It's this kind of random nature that we're trying to get rid of, I think. We're going to limit the number of universities involved because we've got this pilot running. We're going to limit the number of students. We're probably thinking, I think, a little bit about 10 or so students per university. That kind of number feels manageable for this kind of early pilot. And that almost certainly means we're going to have the same number of mentors, and that feels manageable and that feels achievable, given the volunteers I've spoken to already who are keen on being a mentor. So it's that kind of size, 3 universities, 10, a dozen, something along those lines, mentees, students at each one, and the same number of mentors doing the mentoring, and then a bit of other admin going on alongside these things. So that's what this thing will look like, roughly speaking. As part of the pilot nature of this thing, we are absolutely thinking about learning from this experience. So please do stick some stuff in the chat, by the way, if you know differently. But my understanding of our industry is that we don't have this. There's a sort of similar program going on at the University of the West of England, where one particular business does something like this with one particular university course. But what we don't have is something in the IT space, in software engineering, computing, computer science space, where a professional body like BCS does this as a matter of course, where we say, we will mediate these mentor relationships from people in industry locally to students locally. That's not a thing. Please do stick a comment in the chat if you know of a program like this that is up and running already. I don't think there is one. I'll be very, very happy to learn if there is, and we'll try and learn from it if one exists. So what we are going to do is get regular feedback from mentors, regular feedback from students, regular feedback from universities, regular feedback from everybody else involved. So as you might imagine from a pilot program, a lot of the stuff that we're going to be doing here will be a learning experience. So it's not just about saying, we know this is going to work, we're going to run it, it's going to be small at the start, but we know how this is going to work. We've got some decent ideas about how this is going to work, and I think it will work, but we are absolutely open to the notion that we're going to learn from this as time goes on. We're planning at the moment 6 feedback sessions. These are going to be very, very low touch feedback sessions. I'll come back to that in a moment. Thanks, Phil. And we'll fit into we'll fit those feedback sessions into the published results at the end of the program, where we learn from experience. There'll be some objective stuff and some subjective stuff. So there's a question here. Thanks for that, Phil. How does this program fit in with the university's existing mentor programs? So there's 2 answers to that, really. One is that we don't know yet. We're going to work this out as we go along to some extent. The other aspect of the question, I guess, is does it fit in? So the answer to that one is it absolutely does. And in fact, the feedback, when I spoke about the feedback from the universities earlier, the universities have all, the pilot universities have all said, we want this to happen. So yeah, we're absolutely going to make this work with existing schemes. If Phil, by the way, there's 2 questions there, Phil, if you're talking about an existing program where the mentor and mentee are both inside the university, then we'll fit in with that. If you know of something on top of that exists, then please do stick a comment in the chat. So Imperial run an alumni mentoring scheme for students. Interesting. I'd be very, very keen on hearing more about that. This, I imagine, is where you have an alumnus mentoring someone back at their old place, I guess. That sounds kind of similar. I studied in Bristol. That wasn't something that certainly wasn't something that I was aware of. It might be something that exists. But this being a pilot program, very, very keen on exploring the relationships between this and other similar things. That leads Trinity, our careers team helps to find industrial mentors locally for final year students. Interesting. So final year students, I imagine, are ones who might have already finished an internship if they were going to have one. So with that the case, that feels different, because that feels as if we're adding a mentor in once they've had that industrial contact. So post-industrial contact mentoring is different. What we're talking about here is adding in early. But with all of these things, thanks to these comments, with all of these things, there's going to be valuable things for comparison. So if you want to stick some details in at some point on these things, then do please hit me up afterwards. Thanks for those. So who are the players in this thing? Who's actually going to be doing the thing? So there's comfortably 4 different roles of people involved in this. There's the students themselves, who are going to be the mentees in this, who will be getting the mentoring. There's the mentors, and I'm absolutely expecting the people on this call to be some of those. And that role will basically be finding a mentee and then doing the mentoring. So I don't want to dive too much today into what mentoring is. Hopefully everyone on the call has got some idea at least about what mentoring is. But there's 2 things to touch on lightly. One is that mentoring is just one of these support roles that we can have in this space. Mentoring and coaching are different things, and sometimes people don't have the same view on what that difference is. But additionally, on top of that little detail that we already have in the industry in general about what mentoring means, additionally, we don't currently have this notion of doing this where we've got that industry student thing, or at least we don't right now here. So some of these comments so far mean that we might have seen something similar, but that's that discrepancy between mentoring in general and mentoring in this case. So that's going to be something we need to dive into the detail for over the next couple of months. But we are absolutely looking for mentors to get involved in this program. Another thing that we're looking for is mentors, that is people who might mentor the mentors. So I'm very, very keen on getting people who are a little bit closer to their own recent graduation to be involved in this. So that Imperial, I think it was, where we say we have this alumni mentoring scheme. I'm guessing that some of those at least will be, I've only just graduated, so I'm going to be really quite close in age and experience level. I've got that shared experience, but I've also got that close tie to the student I'm mentoring. With that in mind, there may be value in having mentors, those who can help the mentors out rather than simply helping out the students themselves. And then we've got to run the scheme itself. Some of that will be voluntary, some of that will be done by BCS. So, but these are the people who have roles in this. While I flipped slides, Cindy, are there plans to make this available for students outside the UK? Potentially, but not immediately. This pilot is really quite limited. This pilot is deliberately limited. Chetan, I'll come to that question at some point naturally. To join the mentorship program, there'll be a link at the end of this slide. So the organizational players for this are a little bit more complex. So rather than the people who are going to do stuff in this program, the organizations, sorry, I've got somebody there. There we are. The organizations are naturally the universities themselves. So we're thinking here about Bath and UWE, but also in particular, we're thinking about degree course leads. So course leads, module leads, those who have got a particular relationship with the courses that we're talking about here, but ultimately the universities. So the BCS branches, so BCS is divided into many things, but branches from a BCS point of view have this regional UK-wide focus. So when we think about branch here, I'm thinking about Bristol and Bath, this smallish geographical area. Now in this pilot, it's just one branch, but should this widen out a little bit more, we're thinking about those regions where we have industry linking with BCS, linking with other things in that region. This feels like a natural way to play this because a lot of these mentoring relationships are going to be built up face-to-face. We kind of want, and I'll touch in a moment on why sometimes this won't be what we're after, but a lot of the time, what we're going to be after is physical face-to-face meetings. We'll actually meet a mentor face-to-face and talk about computers and software and education and industry and internships and stuff. Additionally, one of the reasons why we might do that is because a mentor might give me a lead into a job afterwards. And that's probably going to be a local job somewhere nearby. Not necessarily, but you get the feel from that, hopefully. The BCS equity groups are going to be another group of stakeholders in this, another group of players in this. And here's where I touched earlier on the notion that we might not insist everyone be local, having physical face-to-face meetings here. Because the BCS equity groups are those specialist groups where we're thinking about the specialism being an EDI-focused specialism. So something other than technical and how computers work, where the semicolon goes in Python. It's not about that. The specialism for these groups, which is why we call them equity groups, is something kind of EDI related. So there are 5 equity groups, one of which I've missed off this list deliberately. I'll tell you why that is in a moment. BCS Women, Embrace, Neurodiverse IT, there's only one I in University, I misspelled that, and Pride. So in fact, I'm the inclusion officer myself for the Pride specialist group, for the Pride equity group. And what we're doing here as the equity group players in this whole picture is, I guess, twofold, perhaps threefold. The first one, and we've begun this work already, is to look at the program itself and see if the program is going to work from an EDI point of view, from several EDI points of view. So is the program going to help? Is it going to make IT good for society? We use this line a lot in BCS. Making IT good for society is ultimately what BCS is for. From an EDI point of view, there are some really quite particular things that we want to be doing. So the equity groups play this part in looking at the program itself and making sure the program is going to be effective in doing this. The other aspect, well, one aspect of that is looking at the way we talk about the program, so the publicity materials that we produce, the ads that we produce, the way that we talk about this stuff. We want equity group input into that to make sure that we do that well, that we do it properly. But from an EDI point of view, we do this stuff in the way that we want to and should do this stuff. So we get that expertise inside BCS, ultimately from these equity groups that have this expertise. And as I said already, I've been playing my role as Pride Inclusion Officer to do that part of this development of the programme. Pardon me. Universities, by the way, similarly, will have EDI expertise and EDI requirements that we need to consider when we do this. So these are the organisational players that we have. And then BCS centrally, we expect to be kind of managing the programme. BCS already have this mentoring scheme. We're piggybacking on top of that. So that's where we expect BCS to sit in this. That didn't think. There we are. So as one of those players, we are the branch, we are BCS Bristol and Bath, we are the local representatives here. The kind of things that we do here are going to be actually working with these universities locally. This is what we do. This is our bit. This is how we relate to the other stakeholders of the programme. And there's some significantly valuable admin that we can consider doing here. Things like, when does the university year start? When does it end? When are term dates? When are exam dates? When are reading weeks? When are revision weeks? When are all these bits of the university calendar that students are going to know that mentors won't necessarily know, or at least won't have access to in a convenient form? We can do all that admin stuff. I don't want to spend too much time talking about the admin stuff, except to say there's value to be done in that. We don't want each individual mentor doing this themselves. We want this to be presented in some convenient way so that mentors can go on and do the mentoring. We want this to be a simple process for everyone involved, well, for everyone else involved. We'll do that drudgery in the branch, and everyone else can get involved in doing the mentoring and adding that value to the students' careers. The level of detail just below that, though, is things like course details, where we can get from universities things like what are they studying this term, what are they studying next term, what are they studying this year as a whole, what are the learning outcomes for this module, this module, and this module. That can be a really valuable basis on which to have a mentor relationship. All that kind of stuff that you would hope you've got access to, we intend to give that access. So we've spoken to universities about getting access to this information already, and they're on board with this. This is feeling really quite encouraging generally. So that's what the branch will be providing in this picture. What BCS as a whole could provide is something as mundane as that, the admin stuff. We'll do the admin stuff. As I said, Adam Scott, our VC, is already having conversations about how we can make this better, how we can make it more simple for students to do. Additionally, we're really hoping for additional training for mentors, shared experiences, a forum in which we can define and shape the programme. So the comments that we've seen so far are not local ones. These are not comments where BCS locally, the branch, can do this stuff solo. They're conversations where we need to have a bit of a more nationwide picture and think about what's going on in Leeds, what's going on in wherever else we have here. Imperial, Leeds, and Cardiff are places that we've mentioned in the past 20 minutes. We need to get that information. We need to have those comparisons done over the next year or so. That's the kind of national picture that BCS can provide here. So the equity groups, though, diving into a little bit more detail, because I want to use this session to persuade people to join in as mentors, even when they're not local. What the equity groups can provide is that expertise on the structure of the program and that expertise on the publication, the materials we produce, the things we write, the things we say about the program so that we do that right. But then additionally, what we absolutely want equity groups to provide is access to mentors. What we want is for BCS women and Embrace and Neurodiversity and Pride to use our own groups, to use these equity groups to say, our industry, our society as a whole has got a couple of problems, putting it a little bit mildly, in that there are people who are disadvantaged, underrepresented in the industry. There are people who are disadvantaged in society in general. If we're going to do something to benefit students, what we want to do is do something to benefit students in a way that improves that EDI picture, that makes the disadvantage that we apply to these people in society less disadvantaged. We want to make this better. One of the ways we can do that is by defining the program. Another way is absolutely going to be, let's go out to all these equity groups and say, please be a mentor. Please consider joining in this program, showing yourself, being visible. If you're a successful woman in IT, show that off. Show that BCS Women does a fantastic job already of doing that kind of showing off. Please join in showing off in this arena as well. So we can have mentors from these groups in addition to local mentors. So those are the two ways that we want to get mentors involved here. Thank you for that. But those are the three ways we want the equity groups to join in. So I'm not, being careful not to double click and miss out on your slides here. What the universities provide, on the other hand, though, is that access to students. So what we want to do is not say, does anyone know any students who might be interested in this? Because what that would do is give us this random nature of students happening to meet somebody in a coffee shop. What we want is direct access into universities, direct timetable, scheduled, maybe mandatory, maybe not mandatory, access to students to talk about the program. When we go into a session early on in term 1 to second years and say, I want to talk about this mentoring program. It's a pilot. We're going to do it like this. Here's where you sign up. Here's what the value can be that you can get from this stuff. If you want to sign up, here's how you sign up. Here's my contact details. We'll talk about this at some point if you need any more help. Ultimately, sign up to the program. And all three universities, thankfully, and I have to confess, slightly surprisingly for me, have said, yeah, okay, we can do that. So we've got that agreement in principle already to say, yep, we'll get somebody in from BCS Bristol to talk about this program early on in the upcoming year, talk about the program, and gets directly involved with students so we can bring this benefit to those who might not otherwise see it. Additionally, of course, I talked about getting access to those course details, and we'll get those. Again, this is admin level stuff, but in admin level stuff that for some reason we haven't had yet. We don't have this publicly available detail about what the courses look like that might benefit mentors. When I say publicly available, by the way, we're not asking for secret business. We're not asking for exam answers and that kind of stuff. We're just asking for things like times and dates. It's already there. It's just not already there in a way that's collated in a useful way. So that kind of stuff is what the universities can give us. Here's the important part, though. Here's the absolutely key part for today, certainly. What you can provide is being a mentor. You can do that thing that we need. All the other stuff that we've talked about so far today, all of that stuff is the admin that we in the branch will do, maybe with help from a couple of you, we in the branch will do to set this program up. What we absolutely need is the mentors. We need mentors to volunteer and say, I will spend a couple of hours every term being a mentor to a student. That's the kind of ask we're talking about. We're not talking about 10 hours a week for the next 5 years. We're talking about really a low-level ask, probably got somebody else in. There we are. We're talking about a fairly low-level ask, but that expertise. So I've talked about imposter syndrome elsewhere. I've been in sessions where I've helped someone else talk about imposter syndrome elsewhere. And in fact, what we often stress is that many people in our industry have skills, have experiences, have potential value that they're not aware of. People quite a lot of the time underestimate the value of their own skills, their own experiences, their own value to a business, to society, to the industry. So being a mentor is something that you might well think is not for you. I would absolutely urge everybody here, certainly everyone in our industry generally, probably, to reconsider that and think that you may well have relevant experience that will let you provide value to a student. That relevant experience, by the way, probably means that you work in this industry. It absolutely does not mean you've got loads and loads of experience in terms of amount of experience. It will absolutely include people who work in our industry who are tied into groups like BCS Women, to Embrace, to Neurodiversity, and to Pride. We absolutely want those people to be involved. I'm one of those people. We want those people to be involved. And we want local people as well to be involved, because a lot of the stuff is going to come from local people. But this is what we want. We want these mentors for students. This is the key thing. This is the ultimate goal, is to have those mentors. Being a mentor is going to be a thing as well. We absolutely want mentors for the mentors, especially if we're very keen, which I am, on having those mentors, perhaps not having as much experience as my 25, 30. There's at least one person on the call, by the way, who's got considerably more experience than I have. And while that's going to add value, that's not where I'm setting the bar. The bar is going to be set considerably lower in terms of time than that. Mentors are going to be useful. And then helping with the program itself. So there's a couple of people from BCS outside Bristol and Bath I've spoken to already today on this call. Making this program work, making this program a success. So you might be aware already of the BCS Fellows of the Future program. So if you've got BCS Fellowship in your sights over the next couple of years, I would be absolutely keen on helping you help out the program in a way that explores your potential future enhancement. By the way, I'm not sure if there's anyone on this call who fits into this category for me, but I've been a mentor for several people over the past 6, 7 more years. I have absolutely learned as much from them, from a couple of them, more from them than they've learned from me. Being a mentor is itself an incredibly valuable experience. So it's not just about altruism. A lot of the stuff is about being a mentor as a career development, as a personal development exercise. By being a mentor, you will undoubtedly learn stuff. You will undoubtedly get better at everything that you do in your day job and elsewhere. I totally, utterly recommend being a mentor. Helping with a program like this, BCS Fellows of the Future, I can absolutely see value in that. This will take you more, a couple of steps along the road towards fellowship, if that's where you're going inside BCS. I'll take a quick break now to look at some of these questions because they're there. What experience in industry are you looking for? What kind of roles? You've talked about software engineering, etc., which is not something I've personally, as I work in IT delivery program manager. Yep, so just let somebody else in. Yeah, I work with some excellent program managers at the moment, and I absolutely think that there is value in having program managers involved in that kind of mentoring. And yeah, so it may well be that there are people who are doing software engineering degrees who end up in program management. In fact, I'm working with one of those people right now. So yeah, it doesn't need to be that direct comparison of I write Python and I use PyTest and I know that's what I'm studying this term, so I'm going to be a mentor. That kind of closeness doesn't need to be there. We're looking at people who are ultimately BCS members. So we know what the scope of our industry is. We know what the shape of our industry is. If you're working IT delivery as a program manager, then I think I'm about to talk about the kind of detail you might write in a profile. So if you want to express in your profile, here's my career history, here's what I've done, here's what I know about, here's what I think about, here's the way I think about things, that kind of thing goes in your profile. And then you may well find a potential mentee who's going to fit in with that. You might find someone doing a software engineering degree who by some time into their second year has thought, actually, I'm not into software engineering, but I'd quite like to work in program management, in which case it might be an ideal fix. So this is from Bev. Second year students often don't know what sort of job they want, so having mentors in different roles would be really beneficial. Yeah, I totally agree, Bev, by the way. And this perhaps is one reason for not doing this in first year, because if you're a second year student, then even if you don't know what kind of job you want, you're quite likely to have to make a choice in that area really quite soon, because second year, if there's going to be an internship, Second year is when you've got to start thinking about applying for that kind of internship. So this is exactly the kind of thing that we're thinking about addressing here, which is that if a second year student doesn't know what sort of job they want, having these discussions. By the way, I mean, imagine this mentor-mentee relationship to be one-to-one, but undoubtedly, not undoubtedly, hopefully, students, certainly students on the program, will talk to each other about what their experiences are as this goes on. Hopefully, they're not going to wait until the end of the program to then say, right, let's all give some feedback. Hopefully, they'll know each other. There'll be 10 or 12 of them per university in the pilot. They're going to talk to each other and share those experiences. So, yeah, I'm not immediately suggesting let's swap mentors, but something along those lines. We've got a couple of students from NTU as well over the years. In fact, some of my favourite interns of the years have been from NTU. But yeah, so all these points are very well taken. So this is what we're talking about here is variety of experience. So yeah, that different roles is going to be massively beneficial, I think. I clicked that, nothing happened. There we are. So there's some words here from the BCS website on mentoring. I won't go into these too much, except to say it's incredibly valuable. And there, that point is made again. What's more, mentoring is always a two-way street. Yeah, absolutely, totally agree. Hopefully there's some people on the course, on the call, who have got this experience already, that mentoring, I mean, without anyone getting big-headed, there's at least one person that I've mentored a little bit, and I've learned loads from him already. I've learned a lot more from my mentees than they've learned from me. My boss is listening as well, so that's not true, but they always learn loads of stuff from me. So I'll talk now briefly about timelines. I've talked more than I expected to already. So the timelines are going to be this. The timelines are going to be, if you want to be a mentor, then we're looking for people to express an interest now. I mean, not in the next hour, well, in the next hour if you like, next couple of days, we're taking expressions of interest already. We've got some volunteers already. We want more. I'll talk about the way you do that in a moment. But from a time point of view, express an interest now. And then I don't want to put a link into the mentoring website just yet, because as I said, we are working with BCS at the moment to see if there's any tweaks we need to do to make that a bit more amenable to this program. But before the first term, and I imagine the people on the call have got in their heads, September, October, that kind of time. That's the kind of detail we want to tie up by getting access to this more well-presented information for universities. Is it September or is it October? It's around about then. But before the first term starts, we will have all the mentors registered on the program. So that's the kind of time we're looking at. And then in that first term, and I'm thinking here about there being 6 terms in a year, not 3 terms in a year. So in that first term, finding a mentee, using this platform to find a mentee. That's the kind of timeline we're looking for mentors. And then beyond that, by the way, meeting as often as is necessary. I'm thinking at least once per term. So in this first pilot year, 6 meetings. I've probably done that with mine already, and the term hasn't started yet. But that's the kind of thing we're thinking of. So for students, by the way, there's at least one student who knows about the program, of course. But the students generally don't know this program is going to exist just yet. So we had the initial conversations about this in, what was it, May or June? I think it was May, maybe June, something along those lines. So they don't know about it yet. The timings have worked out really quite nicely because this has given us the time to define the program before the students get to find out about it. So we're thinking that early in that first time, we're going to get the scheduled time with the students. We're going to go into the universities, talk about the program, get them to register, and then in that first term to find a mentor, to use this platform to find a mentor, and then to have that mentor relationship. The next timeline slide is dull enough that I'm going to take a break here to look through these comments. Able to offer roles? No. LCANE? No, absolutely not. So there will potentially be a value in having people who work in businesses that can offer internships. I can easily see a value to be had in doing that. We're absolutely not requiring that. We're not expecting that. There's absolutely value to be had in having mentors who just do mentoring. So LCANE, no, we're not expecting that. We're not demanding that. Paul says, I'm EMCC, EIA, coach and mentor, BCS fellow, 30 years at NHS, just finished mentoring by FedIt. Yeah, I'm aware of FedIt, thanks. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So initially, yes, Paul, absolutely. In the longer term, perhaps we could hook up separately, in fact, to say something about how this overlaps with health. Yeah, that's very interesting. And then Samuel Huntley, similarly, can't guarantee that you can offer an internship. That's fine. We're not expecting mentors to guarantee that they can even offer internships. If you work for a business that doesn't do internships, that's fine. We're not looking for guaranteed internships. Might be nice for businesses that do offer internships to think about this. I know that my employer has this kind of thing, and that's an interesting aspect to it, but no, absolutely not requiring that. And the timelines for administrators are ultimately now. So, but I couldn't think of a good word for this. I nearly put managers for this. What we're thinking about here is people who want to help us run the scheme. So we have volunteers inside the BCS branch already doing this stuff. And we need a few more. So it's things like making sure the whole scheme goes well, making sure that all the comms goes well, making sure that we get our volunteers involved, making sure we do all the things. We're absolutely going to get help from BCS in doing this well, especially the pilot nature, especially the things where we need to get feedback, ask questions, get some summary data, publish that data. We're going to get help from BCS for doing that. But yeah, if you want to get involved in some way, email me. I'll give you some email addresses in a moment. Talk to us about that, and we can absolutely find a role for you in helping this program go well. But we're starting that now. So before the first time, we've got to do some definition and refinement of the program. We're really close to being there, I think. But there's a little bit of updates to be done. And then for the first time onwards, monitoring that program. So that monitoring will involve things like getting that feedback from the mentors, getting that feedback from the mentees, looking at that feedback, making sure we understand what that feedback looks like, and then maybe a few tiny adjustments along the way. That's what the administration stuff is going to be. There's an interesting question here on how do we decide which students are right for the program? That is a very interesting question. Yes. So for the audience, please throw in your comments if you like over the next 5-10 minutes, which is what we've got left. I have some thoughts on how we might do selection of students in the event that we have too many. Now, I know what my thoughts are, so I'll give people a minute to think about that. So have a think about that now while I vamp for a little moment. My thoughts here are actually the mentoring platform already does this because it works like online dating in a way. I put my mentor profile on there. I describe my career history. I describe myself. I talk about myself a little bit, a couple of paragraphs of stuff, not a lot of stuff. The mentee does something really similar. So I think there has to be this mutual mutual matching. But the mentoring program already does this. You know, the mentee basically will contact a mentor and say, will you be my mentor? I've looked at your career history. I think it's going to have some value to me. And then the mentor will say, yeah, okay, I'll do that. I think that's how it's going to work. If we end up with 1,000 students looking to sign up, that might get a bit complex. I don't think we're going to get to that point. So I think that what we're going to do is just let it run itself out. But that's a very fair question. If anyone's got any thoughts on how we might decide which students make it into the program in the event that we have to make that choice, please do hit me up and we'll talk about that. But that's a great question. Thank you. So I'll come now to the final bits. This is the next step. So I've scheduled for 45 minutes, by the way. I've got a few more minutes of the session set up. Details here. You'll get these slides, by the way. This section is being recorded, but you also get the slides if you don't know. Groups at bcs.uk is a quite small email address to remember though. Email mention student mentoring, that goes to all of the groups. It actually goes to someone at BCS who will then farm that email out. So if you email groups at bcs.uk and mention student mentoring, that will get to us. Additionally, you can sign up to the existing BCS mentoring scheme. I've deliberately not put the link in here because I would like to wait until we've done whichever tweaks we need to make it work for this scheme. If, on the other hand, you would like to hunt down that mentoring scheme and register for it yourself, that's fine, please do. If you have to be in the office in HPE tomorrow, you can talk to me directly about this, or you can join the Bristol and Bath LinkedIn group, which you'll find just by searching LinkedIn. There's one further follow-up there. Yeah, there's a couple of aspects to this that are really interesting from mentoring in general that may have a little tweak, personal tweak perhaps, in the case of students. How does that match happen when one of the parties, when the mentee is a student? Is it all about technical stuff? Is it all about personal stuff? Is it something in the middle? That's an interesting question, especially when you've got a remote relationship, which typically you will have with BCS mentors, and when you have students where there's a fairly large, perhaps, disparity of experience. For me personally, I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know how that would work for me. I know how it has worked in the past. I mentioned running and cycling, in fact, and for me that works because for me there has to be something else. Not there has to be. For me, it's helpful if there's something else to talk about apart from just where the semicolon goes in Python and how program managers work. That's valuable too, but to have that personal relationship where you can actually sit and have a chat over coffee, perhaps ironically enough, that's a big part of it. So that, I think, is an aspect of what does a good mentoring profile look like? So perhaps we'll sort out some training or some stuff or some words that we'll write down on how one might sensibly write a mentoring profile. What bits of myself do I want to write about in my mentoring profile to make sure that any matches that I get from a mentee are going to be good ones? That's a great question. And I wish I knew the answer to the question. I think it's going to depend on the people. So if I'm going in, so imagine we get BCS women joining into this. Certainly, I can easily see a value to be had in saying, I'm a woman in tech. I work as a program manager and I have done for 25 years. And actually, because that would have meant that I started 25 years ago, I've got some experiences that would have been harder because it was 25 years ago and world one, we're not there yet at all. That's almost certainly, I would think, going to be some valuable experience that somebody would, oops, sorry, I got to admit another person, that somebody would take advantage of. That's going to be valuable experience. So how do we do that? How do we decide which bits of ourselves are the relevant bits? That's an interesting question. I will try to work out a way of finding out what training we've got already in this area and sharing that training. So thanks for that. So the next steps are sign up as a mentor, either through an expression of interest by email, groups@bcs.uk, or by finding the mentoring platform. Please do that if you want, but I've very deliberately not put that link in here because we're going to tweak it. We will, at some point in the next, I'm guessing, month or so, publish those course summaries. So Bath Uni will give us all the details about when people are studying what and when the university year is. We haven't got those yet. We're going to have those in a month or so. Hopefully, anyone who's progressive enough to have joined in this call will also be able to find out those course details themselves. But have a think about whether you can be a mentor. If you've got value to add as a mentor, do sign up as a mentor. So that's it. I think that's all I have. There's some links at the end of this, but I'll share these slides with you, and these will be emailed out to you in the next day or so.